Cleveland Heights, University Heights City School Board of Education to order. Mr. Gaynor, would you call the roll?
Mr. Coble. Here. Ms. Pepler.
Here.
Mr. Register.
Here.
Mr. Silverman.
Here.
Mr. Zucker.
Here.
Okay, tonight we're doing a work session on for the first reading of the Neola policies, but the superintendent has a couple of words or two that she'd like to say before we get into that.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr.
Dr.
Register.
McDaniel.
I'd like to take a brief moment before we begin tonight to recognize each of you. We don't typically have recognitions at a work session, but I'd like to break tradition since this is School Board Recognition Month and take a moment to publicly thank you for all of your hard work and the time you've put into your role as a board member. Please accept the plaque in front of you as a token of our appreciation. The tough decisions you have to make affect our children and thus our community. The policies you establish provide the important framework for how our public schools work. You have great tasks before you this year, and I want to salute you, Ron Register, Nancy Pepler, Eric Coble, Cal Zucker, and Eric Silverman, for your dedication and hard work ahead. I applaud you for the vision and voice you have for our schools to help shape a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Good.
So we should move on. With that said, but we should let the audience know if anybody wants to thank us during this month, then feel free.
They're welcome to. They're not going to want to thank us after sitting through tonight.
That's true.
This is
So should we turn it over to you or to Joe or what?
Sure. This evening, we have first reading of the Neola policies, and Dr. Mitchler is with us this evening to guide us through that process.
Thank you and good evening. I know that, as Mr. Register just said, we killed a number of trees, but House Bill 56 and subsequent legislation kind of is requiring that also because there's just so many concurrent changes constantly. Although you have all the documents, I did put together.
Dr. Mitchell,
Yes.
let's slow down for just a second. Is this House Bill 59 or 56?
56.
Okay, this.
A lot of this is 56.
Okay.
Did I say 9?
no.
No, but it
Okay.
says
No, but
59.
it says
on the-
59 in the.
Oh, yeah, 56 is what a lot of these policies are
Okay.
referring to. 113, which is out there working now, will create the next logjam 6 months from now. So in the three-ring binder, it's the exact same documents that you had before, except I organized them hopefully just a little bit better from the standpoint that they're in sections, the exact same sections as are on the overview. Neola puts together that overview, so it's a brief summary of why each policy is being recommended for a change. And then also for Mr. Silverman's being new to this process, I put together a summary, which is at on the sleeve of your binder, of what this process is. And I'd just like to go over that for a few minutes, and then we'll get right into it. And that is, once again, that we do this twice a year, that Neola does provide an overview, which is those little paragraphs that are in the intros. That the documents themselves, anything that's bolded is new language. Anything that's a strike-through is not our internal recommendation, that's a Neola strike-through, that language is no longer necessary or it conflicts with something else. There's the boxes, and those boxes are discretionary. Those are decision language. We can or can't use them, and the important part of that is they're supposed to provide clarity, but it's not a recommendation from Neola. The only thing those decision boxes are is that somebody in their group has asked for it at some point, and they vetted that it's legal.
I missed the end of that sentence, that somebody within the Neola participating.
Within all of their client
Right.
base at some point. So if you see a list of 8 different decision boxes.
The
It's
nutrition
not that they're recommending any or all of them.
I see.
It's up to our discretion.
And, but somebody within their client
Somebody at
list
some point in time did.
came up with that list
Yes.
or,
Yeah, or the
Okay.
list over time was
I
added
see.
too.
And
Okay.
they actually reviewed it to make sure that
It's
it was
legal.
legal,
Okay.
that it was
Yeah,
legal.
so any of those that we choose are legal, but we don't have to choose any, or we can make whatever choice best fits us.
Okay, thank you.
The process then is we go through these every 6 months. If there's something, just like the one you passed 3 meetings ago, which was regarding all of the things with the homeschool students having the availability now to go to interscholastics, those are separate, but basically it's twice a year. We start by reviewing them administratively and make recommendations on those decision boxes. That's why everybody's here in case there's, because I don't claim to be an expert on this, all 400 of these pages. We have 3 readings. Anything that we can't answer at this reading or needs further investigation, we'll go out, get that information, make whatever changes, bring back to you for the second reading. If we need to, we'll go through that process again for the third reading. And then once adopted, Neola takes their production centers in Coshocton. It usually takes about a month for them to provide us 2 copies, but more important, it goes on our website. So our website is up to date with everything that we have passed. So that's a review of the process. And then it's time to just go right into it. The first one, employment of the superintendent. You saw on the paragraph what the changes are. Much of it is, the checkboxes themselves are the same as current policy. The new language is on page 2, 3, and just 2 and 3. Any questions on that one?
And the way, when we look at these check boxes, if they're checked, we're including them in our
That we're
policy.
including them, right?
Okay.
And when we reviewed them, these checks are the same checks we had the last time we did this.
Okay.
So these are the same checks we already had before?
Yes.
So this is nothing
Right.
added?
But the bold is new.
Except when
Guess
we,
I'm not,
Bolded.
when we
If it's
review
bolded,
policy,
right,
Neola
right.
gives us a template like we've never seen it before.
Right.
okay, so that's, all right. I was
Yeah.
just wondering why we weren't looking at the ones we'd already approved plus whatever
Right.
new stuff, but you're just sitting, okay.
They just give us this
All right.
as a template. Otherwise, we'd be around forever trying to figure out what we did
What
and
you didn't do, yeah,
And
fair enough.
sometimes you may want to make a change.
Fair enough. Right.
Could we just take a minute and just say, you know, I know we have language that says that they can receive an alternative superintendent's license. Is that at our request?
Yes, it is at the board's request. Should the board choose to employ a superintendent who does not have a regular license, the board that wants to hire that superintendent makes the application or the request of the Ohio Department of Education to issue that. You actually have to sign off on that request.
And they would, the understanding is that within that 2-year period, they would get a license?
Yes.
What happens if they don't?
I believe there's one time that you can renew that alternative, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
mean, if you had a 3-year contract and they were at the end of 2 years, and they didn't do it, then,
They
okay.
don't have a valid license or
Right,
whatever.
okay.
I just have one question, and it'd be a recurring question with a number of the things that were in here. There, in that bolded statement, one of the parts says, an alternative superintendent license to a proposed candidate for the superintendency, provided the candidate is of good moral character. How do we judge that?
Go look at the newspaper.
Magic 8 ball.
I mean, it just seems like a
odd
throwaway
statement within here.
I mean, I get the idea, but I mean, who's judging good moral character and how?
I
No,
can't
I
answer
know,
that.
I'm
No,
not
but I
saying
think
it's your
you'll
job. I
probably
mean,
see in the
it's-
requirements that good moral character is in all of our,
Right, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
Well, and in part, Cal, I would think part of it's with the background check.
Right.
I just, again, it just seems like a odd statement for a policy, but,
Every community can interpret it differently.
yeah, so. Don't know what it means, I
Clears it
guess,
up
It's
with the
just throwing it out there.
But it might be
But
one of
we're not
those
naming
things that you
names.
know when you see it.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. Okay, you know,
Or
I
when
guess
you
I can
don't
say
see it, maybe you know it.
Okay.
Next one is employment of the treasurer. You'll see in the paragraph the change there.
Joe, it just struck me, when we think about we're dealing with legal requirements, and do we have this reviewed by lawyers or
As a matter of fact, Mr. Britton's firm is Neola's legal firm.
Okay. That answers that.
There it is. So I had a question about this one too. Do we need to, since we have a chief financial officer, do we have to throw that in there in any way? I guess you're the chief, Scott, you're the chief financial officer and treasurer, right? Does it have to in any way reference that? Okay, then the only other thing I would say is just, I don't know if it's worth making this structure parallel to the structure of the policy right before it. I mean, it's similar, but I mean, I don't know if you want to look at that at some point. I don't think we have to do that here at this meeting.
Well, and I guess with both of them having the new bolded area referencing revised code 3319-031, that these are new requirements, that be put right into the contract. Is that something, how much, like, for instance, with the contract that's in effect currently, when would we have to add those?
We'd have to pass that question on,
Okay.
Say that
or even
again.
if you would need to, 'cause it's discretionary.
But if we pass it this way as our policy,
Yeah.
then at what, current contract,
If you wanted
at what
to
point would
provide
we?
those additional responsibilities, yeah.
Joe, I think I'm a little confused.
No, I
Okay.
think this, go ahead.
It says such contract shall include, and that is one of the items that's checked. A specification of any powers, duties assigned by the board to the either superintendent or treasurer
Right.
pursuant to revised code. So it would appear as if that has to be included when it says shall.
Yeah. All I could do is
So-
say, because I think what they're saying here is if the board determines to combine those duties, it needs to be in here if.
Okay. Okay,
What do
Just
you mean
reading,
combine?
just reading the overview.
okay, okay.
Is that something you like clarification on? I'll come back in
Yeah.
the second reading. Because
think so,
I
too.
understand what you're saying. The overview tends to conflict with what that paragraph says.
Well, it says that it's got to be in the contract is what is the interpretation of it now.
Yeah,
So that
that's
means
the
at what point do you have to have it in their contract? Is it upon
Yeah,
the
do you?
renewal of a contract, or
Or
do
do we
you
have to
put it
change
in
it?
the present contract? But, you know,
Yes.
Okey-doke.
Joe, just to be a little bit more clear about the parallel structure, one of the things that stood out to me especially, just as an example, in 1220, which is the superintendent's one, if you look on page 2, the bolded, the last checkbox that was bolded, consideration of all applicants fairly without discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, et cetera. There's nothing parallel to that in the treasurers, and I would think that would be very important to have. Yeah. I would think that would be an important thing to be in. there.
Treasurers have a better lobbying group.
that means that we can discriminate when it comes to this.
Thank you for that.
And would you like us to add that in for the second reading?
I would think it's, yeah. I mean, if you look at the, yeah.
Is it in the administrator's?
You're asking if I remember what I did.
You know, it's kind of interesting because.
Yeah, there isn't
it's
a recruitment procedures section. yeah.
No, we're going to come to the administration.
There's a, and I hope I didn't overlook this, but there seems to be this, okay, it's in both of them, okay. So that bold piece it would be something that
We'll
we,
move that over to the treasurers
Okay.
also.
Just, well, I know jumping ahead, but it looks like potentially it's not in the administrators either.
Keep it up.
Coming 15, 20, yeah.
We're adding it.
Add it across the board.
Yep, will do. And as a segue, we're into 1520 now, employment of administrators. You'll see on the first page, we just have never listed categories before, so we didn't actually put a listing in.
So how do we determine who those people are? By our contract?
Yes. And by the administrator's negotiated agreement for most of them.
But that's what would be
Yeah.
that's what I meant, the agreement. So within the context of the agreement, there would be this listing of titles
Yes,
that fit
They're included.
under this
yes,
category.
yes. And on page 4 of 5, one of the modifications we made from Neola's template is they had furthermore, an administrator shall be deemed reemployed upon expiration of his or her contract term unless the administrator notifies his board to the contrary on or before, says the 15th day of June. We back that up to the first day of June to be in alignment with the OPES evaluation policy. Anything else for administrators, and we will move that one paragraph over. The next one is actually 3 policies. FMLA is 3 different times. All of the check marks are the same. And actually, from the conversations that Mr. Lombardo's had with legal counsel, we actually have an update to this. If you'd take a look.
Could we take a step back?
Sure.
Just for a second? You know, we have this new evaluation system coming into play as far as the administrators are concerned.
Yes.
And we talk about the terms of the contract and things like that. How does this interplay? You know, for example, anybody that's been here 3 years and we're supposed to have a 2-year renewed contract, but if the evaluation kicks in, OTES and OPES, these things kick in, wouldn't they have an impact on how this policy would read?
I don't believe so, but I may have to defer that to somebody else, because I believe that the unless this has changed recently, the administrative evaluation is still a guidance for the board. It doesn't have the same power as the teacher evaluation. There is somewhere in the code that still says, let nothing within here predetermine that a Board of Education can have blah, 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 blah.
However, and not to confuse the issue, the evaluations need to be completed during each year of the administrator's employment in order, or if they're not done, it could tie our hands at some points, depending on what we'd like to do with those administrators.
Right.
So there's an expectation that annually there are evaluations done. During the year they're in a final contract, there are actually 2 evaluations that must be completed by certain dates.
Okay, so when do we expect that the principal's evaluation to be in place? I guess we use the guide now.
We're using OPES this year, and it has firm dates, timelines, and everything.
Okay, and so if there are some implications relative to that issue, then we would have a chance to come back and look at the policies related to it. So I'm thinking these policies might tie back into the evaluation system that we're
Yeah.
in some phase of putting into place.
Yeah, we actually have another policy here that specifically addresses OPES. That when you adopted the teacher evaluation in June
Right.
of last year, you also linked the administrative evaluation to the state OPES, Ohio Principal Evaluation System. So all of that is already tied into policy.
Okay. I'm with you, so I will see how this unfolds, I guess, over time.
I think what you're asking is there any way that that policy can conflict with this policy?
Yes, that's what I'm
And we can,
getting at.
we can find.
Double check.
Yeah, I think we would want to make sure of that.
What was there's one of the policies in here that specifies that any contracts done before a certain date, that this does not apply to them, and I don't remember what element that was now. It's somewhere in here.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that maybe this is, in terms of what we're reviewing, have we looked through all of our policies to get to these ones that need to be changed, or we're just looking at the ones that are changed based on the law that have come into being because of that?
From about, 2007 through 11, we updated all of our
Right.
policies. Used to bring all the personnel, then all the
Right, right.
student. And once we finish that cycle, then at that point in time, we've been updating as Neola has brought to us.
Okay. So I'm not sure, Eric, it might be,
It could have been unrelated to OTES or OPES. I don't remember now what element it was. I just remember seeing that somewhere in the material. It was something specific.
well, there's a lot to remember, isn't it? It is.
You're absolutely right, and it's harder to remember because it changed so much, changes so quickly. Some of these that you'll see later in this packet, you've looked at maybe 3 or 4 times in a row now, because they constantly change.
Okay.
Ready for FMLA? Actually, FMLA, even though it's 15 to 17 pages each, is the same times 3. So we'll be looking at 1630, 3430, and 4430 are the same. If you would please take a look at page 2 of 1630-01. Down at the bottom, it was the very last one, a rolling 12-month period was checked. I'd like to cross that off and instead check the one in the...
Bless you.
Bless you.
Check the one where?
Right in the middle, right on top of that, the 12-month period measured forward from the date the staff member's first FMLA leave begins. Right in the middle of the 3, Mr. Lombardo checked with legal counsel, and this language coincides with the agreement, the contracts,
Okay.
which is, we didn't catch that the first time.
And that would hold true for all 3.
And that holds through for all of them, all 3 of them, because they were all marked the exact same.
Do we have situations where somebody might go out and is not originally FMLA leave, but it could become such?
Yeah, I would have to refer to my colleague over there. I'm not familiar with FMLA personally.
Well, okay.
Good evening.
Hi.
As far as FMLA, I am learning about FMLA every day, so I can try to answer as many questions as I can, and if not, I can find out for you. But FMLA doesn't really, what FMLA does is it offers 12 weeks or 60 days, and that could be 1 hour, that can be a day, that can be 5 days, so there's really no set time frame when you can use FMLA. If they're going to be on an extended leave, there's an approval process where documents get sent to those. We request that after, in our district, we request after 10 days, consecutive days. We'll send out paperwork, they'll fill that paperwork out, and then if it's approved, then FMLA will start that first day they were out on absent.
Okay, but we would be getting approval for it sometime after that first day.
That's correct.
Okay.
The next decision box is on page 8. And again, as part of Mr. Lombardo's consultation today, though, if you take a look at the paragraph that starts to substitute, i.e. run concurrently, any of his, her earned leave, assault leave was crossed out, we're putting that back in and checking that.
Notice that was not on the other two.
And
I
on
didn't
the other
know why
two,
it
those
was-
weren't.
I mean, assault leave was not checked,
Uh,
not
and-
crossed out in the other two, and I didn't know why.
And that was the whole thing when we saw that, what started the conversation, why was it on one and not the other, which then led into the other review.
But this was confusing to me because you didn't check the box, the main box says it says the staff member may request.
Yeah, that
It's
should
not
be,
requ-
that's an oversight.
Oh,
But you checked the
got
box
require.
before it.
I thought you were saying.
No, the board shall require the staff member to, as
Oh, okay.
opposed to
Oh,
the
I
Yeah,
staff
see.
member
instead of
request.
may
Yeah, I
request.
see, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see how to read that. I'm sorry, that's just me being dumb. Okay, got it.
So the stuff, say that the stuff under that second box is not checked. That box should be checked?
No,
No.
the board shall require, that's the box that checked.
Not on, under staff request.
Yeah,
It's
that one
under
should
board
not be checked.
requirement.
The one that we want to check now is the one right next to the word assault, where we have it crossed out. That should not be crossed out.
Okay, so this box here should go away. That says may request, and it should be directly
Right.
under the board
Right.
shall
Yeah.
require.
Right, and since we didn't check that, it goes away.
Got it.
And I believe the next one is on page 13.
Oh, just before we move too quickly here, what is this on occasion? I mean, what could we be referencing here? On occasion, the board may waive.
What are you looking at, Ron?
On the bottom of that paragraph.
Yeah, on the
that
bottom
has
of that
check.
paragraph, it says that on occasion.
Oh,
And I mean, for me, that's might not be enough guidance on what that means.
You know, it goes back to, at some point, that's the wording that was put into, and it's legal wording. We could leave it, you can scratch it and just
Strike
start
it.
with the board may waive any procedural requirements for the taking of any type of paid leave. I mean, or you can cross that out. It's just,
I would agree with you, Ron, that it's very wishy-washy. It's not going to help, it doesn't help me understand the policy.
I would say that,
Makes it more,
yeah, I would say I'm inclined to drop
Strike
on
it.
occasion.
we could start with the board.
Yeah, I mean, we can waive it or not. And I
Absolutely.
guess we would do that on occasion rather than on non-occasion.
You could say once in a while.
Sometimes.
Yeah,
Maybe.
at some point in time, somebody wanted this wording.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
The next series of check boxes are on page 13 of 15. And the last is on page 14 of 15.
is there, just for language purposes, I wasn't sure if we needed an or in this on page 13. The board authorizes its healthcare provider, human resource professional, leave administrator to author, is that all of those, or is there an or should there be an? You see what I mean? Are those three different people, or are we authorizing
Yeah.
all three to do this? At the same
Authorizing,
well,
One of them?
yeah, is authorizing its healthcare provider, human resource professional, and leave administrator.
Okay,
I had instead of four, yeah.
okay. You tuck that and in there just for my English. Yes.
I think the answer.
Because right now I don't, yeah, it doesn't quite, if I were just reading it, which I never will again, it would
Well,
confuse me.
we did a little grammar policing also, so we could
I
put an
have
and
no
in.
doubt you did. It's the same on all of them. 'cause
And
that
or.
one struck me each time.
Anything else on this one?
The only other question I had was at the very beginning, and it's for each of them, and I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So it starts out by saying, on the first page, eligible staff members may take up to 12 work weeks of job-protected unpaid leave. Is that during each of the 12-month periods as defined on the next page, or is that with any qualifying event, or I'm not sure what defines when they can take the 12 work weeks?
What page are you on?
Lombardo?
Page 1, first paragraph.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah, I know, but I just told them.
If you look in the FMLA policy, the 12-month period measured forward, that's where that comes into play. So whenever they're taking their sick leave, let's say it's November 15th, that's when the FMLA would start, and it would be within that calendar year.
12 weeks starting at that 12-month period.
Correct.
Within a calendar year, Paul?
Not
That would be, no, it would be a
12-month
year,
period.
12 months.
Yeah.
Okay, you
So
said
from
calendar.
November to November
Yeah.
of the next year would be that year.
Right, and I got that somehow, and maybe it's my misreading of this, by the way, so don't kid yourself, but when they were talking about that 12-month period, that was talking about the eligibility of employees, and I somehow didn't coordinate that with this being, that's when they're eligible, not necessarily when the 12 weeks began, but that's fine with me, as long as that's what that means.
Yeah, right, that
Wouldn't that
first
leave a
absence.
question in terms of how the other time might be taken care of? If somebody's eligible for 12 months worth of,
12 weeks.
is it just 12 weeks?
It's 12 weeks within a year.
Months would be a bit much.
Okay, so after the 12 weeks, their job is not protected, is that what it means?
That's correct. But if they have additional sick days in their sick bank, they can use those. And many,
What comes first? Do they have a choice? Can they take unpaid leave and then get to their sick leave, or do they have to take their sick leave first?
they have to take the sick and the personal days first.
And
it
then
runs
that 12 weeks would start after they use all available leave like that?
That, it's concurrent.
It runs concurrently, so they'll be taking their,
It's, yeah, so the employer only has to keep a position open for 12 weeks is one way of
Well, that's-
understanding it.
yeah.
Whether,
so it's not an additional
right.
60 days when they're done.
But if
Okay.
you only have 1 week of sick time, 11 weeks or of all leave, 11 weeks
Right.
are going to be unpaid.
Right.
And it's our job as a district to notify them when they're on
Right.
FMLA.
Now, what kind of notification do we have to give?
We send out the paperwork. We send out paperwork to have them know that they should apply for FMLA. And if they don't return the paperwork, then we will send a letter saying that although you have not returned the paperwork, you will be put on FMLA starting on this date, which will be the first day of their absence.
That means we have some kind of documentation at that point.
Correct.
And then on the back end, when it's time to come off, when the 12 weeks is up, what do we give them? 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month?
Well, they'll get to use all their sick days, but they get up to 60 days. And then after 60 days, let's say they're out of sick leave, then they can ask the board for unpaid leave.
Yeah, but I'm asking, when do we notify them that they should be returned, they should have a return to work order or whatever, or their job is vacated or what,
Yeah, there'll be a follow-up letter, and that comes out of, what am I trying to say? Comes out of the treasurer's office, but there'll be a follow-up letter to remind them of when that day to return is. And that's
But we
for
don't know at
benefit.
what point that would happen. You know what I'm saying? Do we give them a month's notice, a 60-day notice?
I don't know the exact date on that. I'm
Well,
not
is that,
sure.
we're required to give them a notice, right?
That's correct.
Is that in our policy? I guess is what I should ask. Do you know, Joe?
I do not know.
I would probably check that. Because I think that if somebody's out on FMLA and we expect them to return to work, I think it's incumbent upon us to let them know that we expect them to return to work on January 15th, or, we'll have to vacate the job or whatever the language is.
Right.
Thank you, we'll check on that. The exact same items are on 3362 and 4362, so we could skip an entire inch. And while Mr. Lombardo was speaking, I did scratch off on occasion on those other two policies, so that's all consistent. The next one is very similar, anti-harassment. It's new in the administrative section. It's revised. Again, it's exactly the same, meeting new requirements from the Office of Civil Rights, their regulations. But actually, it's not three of them. It's also in the student section. It's just that the student section wasn't put together with this.
What number are we looking at, Joe?
This would be 1662. And the first decision box is on page 8. And that's down at the bottom. This requirement is, normally you don't put names in, you put positions in, because names tend to change over time. This is a requirement to actually put the names in. And those were the names and addresses. And it's consistent for not only this one, but the classified, the professional staff, and the students. It's also a requirement that this be public, and on the next page, we chose the website.
And what page are you on?
And that would be page 9 of 19
Okay.
on 1662.
The names, the actual using the names is a requirement in the House bill in law?
Yeah.
Do you know the wisdom behind that? I'm just curious, or lack of something.
I think probably they want to make sure there's a person, because you have to have it in here, in your policy, that you direct us, that the names be there, and then we have to publish also on the website.
Yeah, I
So-
mean, but they can make the policy more robust by saying,
know. It's-
as designated in administrative, anyway.
Right.
doesn't matter.
Right. And it's, you know, it's here and there, because normally policies are brief and they tie into guidelines, implementing policies. But more and more, we're getting these real long, like credit flexibility and others,
yeah.
that you have to have everything, including the forms. So that is it for the, let's see, anti-harassment page. I've got a note that there's also one on page 15.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is, the decision of the superintendent is final when it goes through that process. And that would be the same for 3362 and 4362.
For some reason, I can't find it in the previous ones. I'm just finding it 4362. On page 15 of 4362. I don't disagree with this. I was just curious why we did not, what the reasoning was behind not checking that a principal will not conduct an investigation unless directed to do so by the compliance officer. Do you see, I'm sorry, second paragraph, where there's a potential check there that we're not going to check. And again, I don't disagree with that. I was just curious. And I think that shows up in the other two as well, or at least in one of the other ones. Did we just want to, is that just about putting all the control with the compliance officer and not wanting the principal to?
Well, I don't remember the specific conversation, but normally we keep away from, we won't do something, we list what we are requiring to do, because you can always determine not to do it. But you'll see there's some others that identify what you're going to, not in this one, but further down, there's one of the policies says, we identify this as being this list. Now, you can also identify this doesn't meet the standard if it's this list. Well, if it's identifying on this list, everything else that isn't on that list isn't.
So,
Well,
Joe, in the portion that Eric just mentioned then, it says that within 2 business days, the compliance officer or designee will initiate. Because the principal part is not checked, it says the principal will not conduct. The principal could in fact be the designee to conduct the
Sure.
investigation?
Yeah.
so we were gonna strike that, is that the case?
We don't have to because we're not checking
No.
it.
Right.
Right, I mean, it'll effectively
to
be.
allow
It'll
shut.
drop
Yeah,
because.
it doesn't prevent us one way or another. We could still do that way.
Is that true then on page 16 as well with, I know we're dropping it as well, but that's bottom part of the first paragraph. The compliance officer may consult with the board's legal counsel. We don't want to leave that option open.
Well, we can do it anyway.
We can do it anyway, but we don't
Yeah.
have to spell it out
We
here.
don't have to spell it out.
Oh, okay, I
It-
didn't know if we needed
By
it.
not putting it in there doesn't prevent that from happening.
Unless
Okay,
we
then-
said may not.
Right.
Right, okay, all right.
Anything else on these? We've actually finished the
One-third
section.
done?
One-third finished. The next section is education program and students. First one is post-secondary enrollment. And there's one change in post-secondary enrollment. PSEO that we've known for years has been a result of state guidelines, and students had to meet the state requirement. Now, it's the eligibility of the individual institution that they're applying to. That was the change that was made.
Okay.
You know, for example, Cleveland State may have different criteria than Tri-C. Instead of having a state criteria, now it goes down to the individual institution if they choose to participate. For example, John Carroll doesn't participate in PSEO programs.
Oh, wow. So at one point, the Board of Regents were making these decisions? I mean, who was making these decisions? If you wanted to get post-secondary option, who was making?
Ohio Department of Education had a set of criteria. You had to have so much of a grade average, you had to have this.
And that was within the ranks of
And-
secondary schools, or was it linked
It
to?
was for any student in a high school, and it was linked to any college in the state of Ohio or university that chose to participate. It was a uniform standard for all schools.
Okay, and so what we're getting into is that it's not uniform anymore.
Now it's not going to be uniform
Is it,
anymore.
is it incumbent upon us to negotiate these things with individual colleges, or does a student do that?
But if we go through it's the college's regular enrollment criteria.
This is probably gonna reduce access to some extent, huh?
I don't know if it's going to reduce access because there's so many different ways. I mean, for example, our early college, and we have in career tech prep with career tech, we have dual enrollment at the high school where kids
Right.
are sitting in English class earning college credit. PSEO used to be the only way to do this. Now it's one of many.
I thought the kids already had to meet the placement standards.
Well, and it's interesting because in some places, PSEO standards were higher than the college's standards. I mean, for example, Cuyahoga Community College is an open enrollment school. If you graduate from high school, you do not have to have a 3.2 or something to enroll in Cuyahoga Community High School. But if you're coming in under PSEO, it was a higher standard because it was the state standard. It was the same as their or Ohio State. So it may increase options. It's brand new. Time will tell. And the may is exactly what we had before. Anything else for PSEO? District-sponsored clubs. This is one of them that there'll be a number of these policies that are being adjusted because of what we've already passed, which was all of the issues regarding concussions for students in extracurriculars and sports, and also in alignment now with the policy on homeschool and non-public schools attending activities and having those availabilities. So a lot of these, you'll see some of these changes. Matter of fact, made a note that we're on page 2 where we chose option 2, and those check marks at the bottom, that is current policy. We just chose, our recommendation is to continue what we have been doing. On page 3, there's a lot of language regarding requirements to get into extracurricular activities, grade point averages and others. We've never done that. We're not recommending that we start, that kids, we should try to get kids in.
Can we go back a minute, Joe?
Sure.
The third check box under non-curricular student activities. I'm just curious, because as I read this, it says, if they're non-curricular and they're initiated by parents or other members of the community, they will be allowed, but this checkbox says, the board will not allow any member of the district staff to assist in the planning, conducting, or evaluating of such an activity during the hours she or he is functioning as a member of the staff. Can you give me an example of, I mean, do we have any of these groups currently functioning, and how would that be
I can't think of an
managed?
example. It's
Okay.
I can't, nothing's come up regarding an issue. It's simply, this is the way it's been written previously.
Okay,
I guess what
I
it,
just-
what it really means is that a person who is being paid to carry out activities that would be regular classroom activities can't
You can't
be,
work on.
they can't work on the clock while they're
Yeah.
on, they
no,
can't
I
do this.
understand the
But I can't
intent,
think
and
of
I
a
support
specific
that. I'm
example.
trying to think of how then would we, would that be, for lack of a better term, but policed or managed or supervised, or, and I was just curious, trying to think of an example of what that might be, but, okay.
What's a non-district sponsored club?
Pardon me?
Do you have an example of what a non-district sponsored, any of these things would be?
Well, it's a non-curricular student
Well-
activity.
Well, it's tied over to the use of district facilities, so
Yeah.
an example may be, and I'm just making this up,
Okay.
the Boy Scouts want to do
Okay.
something. We don't sponsor
don't-
them, but
okay.
it's a reputable club, and they
Gotcha.
rent facilities.
Gotcha.
Or there may be any number of things that are gathered, or put together by students or parents. You know, I don't know, do we sponsor all chess clubs, for example? I don't know.
Right, at the different, that's a good question.
Yeah.
But it could be referencing things like that.
Well, I'm thinking it's probably stuff like the Boy Scouts. I would imagine it's probably things that have, basically you don't have a faculty advisor, or it's gonna have a component where you may have, there may be a religious connotation to it, which would be something we couldn't sponsor.
Well, I think, I'm not sure, you know, and I guess it's worth us thinking through what this is. When, you know, a district-sponsored activity in my head has to do with whether we pay a supplemental or not. I mean, that's how I think about it. That might not be the right way to think about it. But if we don't have a supplemental, then I think maybe it's not one that we're sponsoring.
Well, there's two. One, a million years ago, they used to have fraternities, which were then banned, and then the flip sides would be, and the other component would be, I had a point, but I forgot. But the fraternities was like in the 50s, they had fraternities, and then they were banned. So the reason I'm saying that is because technically a fraternity could conceivably be a non-district sponsored, not having a staff member, but it is technically a club. So the question ends up being, that's why I was curious as to what, basically it's an organization that we don't have a staff member for, or that we don't run.
But what I said was, in my head, it's not necessarily right. It's just how I think
Right.
about it.
Well, now I remember. The yearbooks used to have like the Jimmy Buffett Club. It was a bunch of people who got together so they could have something in the yearbook. So technically, if you had the Jimmy Buffett Club, it would also theoretically fall under this criteria. It was just people wanted a picture in the yearbook. That's what it boiled down to.
Or wear grass skirts or something.
They did that too, I think, so.
What adds to the complication that Nancy's brought up for me is that if you look on that same page, page 2, there's option 1 and option 2. Option 2 is talking about this non-district sponsored, but the after end of options, you're just talking about non-curricular student activities. So anything that's non-curricular, that's during the course of the the school day, that suggests that a staff member can't be a part of it. So
Right.
if there is this is not talking about non-district sponsored at that point in my mind, it's only talking about non-curricular. So I don't know where a non-curricular activity is defined or
Distinguished
not.
from non-district
Yes.
sponsored.
So I see, it is a little bit confusing.
I'm just going by.
Oh, I
since
get that. I don't know
It's
if
trying
there's
to
a way-
clarify a little bit from the standpoint of rentals.
No, I get that, and I guess all
Yeah.
I'm saying in support of what Nancy said is simply, maybe
Yeah.
that's something you guys want to look at, if there's a way to make it clearer, I don't know.
Okey-doke.
Thank you.
Anything else on this one?
The fact that we're not checking anything on page 3 in order to be eligible for any co-curricular, interscholastic, and non-interscholastic extracurricular activity, a student, blah, blah, and blah. That's just
Only that it's
historically, we
been the
don't.
philosophy, we want kids involved in clubs and activities, and we've never put a criteria for that. The more involved, the better.
So if we thought about that piece that Nancy just read, the only thing that's left there is the bold piece. Everything above that is gone.
Right, that is the major change, the bold is now homeschooled
But I'm saying the rest of it
students.
is gone,
Yeah,
right?
everything else is
Right.
gone. We don't have that currently, and we're not recommending
And we
it.
have no latitude because the state says you have to do it.
The bold.
For the bold, yes, that
Right.
has to
Okay.
happen. That
Never
was,
Okay, so if you thought about this page, we got the bold and the 2 paragraphs at the bottom?
yes,
Okay.
yes. And that's very similar to page 4, which is the bold. And that is the paragraph towards the bottom.
And so you'd have the last paragraph on there too?
Yes.
Okay. Who has the responsibility for this? Is it the athletic director or the principal? Do we know at this point?
Or
For making sure these forms are in place?
the athletic director.
Okay. And so if we go to the middle schools, who does it? Principal?
Probably the faculty manager.
Probably the faculty manager.
Well, should we clarify that?
It says, oh, and/or principal, yeah.
It says
Should we
only
add
2
or
people.
designate, yeah.
Yeah, or something like that. Because otherwise, we're not gonna be in compliance with our own
We could put
policies.
designate in, that's a very good suggestion. Got it.
On page 5 of that, bottom, the bold, the component in regards to same academic, non-academic, how is that policed?
Where are you?
I'm sorry, the
5 of R.
2431, page 5 of 6.
Oh, 2431?
2431.
I didn't know we moved over
Oh,
already.
I'm
looking for the
He
bold.
already approved everything else, so.
We got the athletics director.
The,
How is that, where's
the only change on 2431 is way at the back, that very last paragraph on page 5 of 6.
Right. Well, no, my question was, how is that, where's the oversight that the non-public student is,
There's a whole procedure in place.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes to the athletic department,
Okay,
there's
so it's a-
forms, there's checks.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah,
And that was page 5?
page 5 of 6, 2431.
yeah, way at the bottom, the very last thing, that's the only change there. And the next one is the third grade reading guarantee. This is one of those that changes every 3 to 6 months. The clarification here is primarily from the standpoint of who is the designated person who can be the instructor, what conditions they need to go through. It started a year and a half ago where they had to have certain licensure, and it's becoming more flexible.
And there is nothing in here that is our choice, correct? This is all mandated.
Yeah, and
I don't
considering
mean
we
just like
see
little
it, yeah.
choices within the choices,
Yeah,
but
I didn't
within
have
like
marked
every
any-
single piece of
Exact-
this is
Yeah, it's all-
currently in state law, whether it changes next month or
Yeah.
not is.
We did have some choices a few times ago, but now
Right.
they're fine-tuned.
Are these, this is a state assessment, right? Reading readiness is
It's the third
state,
grade reading guarantee, yes.
but it's an assessment, is their assessment,
Right.
Yeah,
right?
there's a whole
It's the
series of assessments, yes. Okay, then, if we're ready, we move into eligibility of resident and non-resident students.
Should we go on the record as saying that?
And if you take a look at your paragraph, this is also changing because of a different statute, not 56. And from my vantage point, the changes are more legalese of what happens when regarding different court actions.
What number is this?
5111.
5111.
About the grandparents stuff.
And like the last one, this actually had no check boxes. It's just adjusting with what the law changed.
I missed that
I don't
part
think,
of it.
this one didn't have any check boxes. It's just updating to law. Next one is health services. Goes back to the updating regarding the concussions and what needs to occur when that happens. And you'll see the new language on page 2. Everything else checked is what we have currently.
Is the 5 days current?
Yes. The next one is,
So if somebody has a concussion on the field, they've got to go see a physician, is that correct?
yes, we have that in
Take
one of
part
the
in anything
policies we approved previously. Yes.
Is there, I'm sorry, just to touch base on this, just almost out of curiosity. On page 2,
Which policy are?
5310 still, the fact that we are, I mean, again, I don't have a problem with saying we have to go with the physician on A and B there at the bottom, as opposed to other healthcare provider. I was just trying to figure out the rationale behind that of what was, do we remember? I assume this is left over from before, but I don't.
I think from this standpoint, and I don't remember which one, but we had previously reviewed other policies where we had also indicated that for this type of a situation, we wanted physician.
No matter what, okay.
So, I mean, we could research that and bring the other policy back to you to see if you wanted to relook at that.
No,
This
and I
one's
don't
just to
disagree
be
with it. I was just trying to
consistent.
remember why. I mean, I can see an obvious reason, but I didn't know if that would limit some of the kids'
Accessibility.
access. Yeah, exactly. Accessibility is the,
If a nurse practitioner or
For
something
instance.
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, right now we have physician.
Right.
And we chose physician because we think that protects us more, or?
And safety for the kids.
Yeah. I can be easy with that.
The food allergy policy is not part of Neola's, and this is one where Mr. Shigalis has been working with legal counsel to be more specific in regard to food allergies. Right now, it's just a section in another policy, 5335, care of students with chronic health conditions. This Mr. Zucker, is a classic policy. It's a paragraph and a half, but it's got about 8 pages of guidelines that Steve has worked with Sherry Massey.
And we decided to, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to minimize the importance of this, but it was already part of a policy, but we decided to elevate it to its own policy because...
I would have to ask Steve to, food allergy.
Steve was totally hoping you would ask this question.
Yeah, I could tell.
One way to come up and say, I don't know. Sorry about that. I don't know the answer to that question.
Again,
This-
I'm not saying it's wrong.
This was in response to some community concerns
Right.
that were raised.
Right.
And I brought it to the administration. We then took it to Britton's firm, and they crafted this policy, and now we're bringing it to the board for your consideration.
So further, is with all those pages of guidelines that go with it, is that still under revisement as well, or is that pretty locked in that we're good with the
Guidelines.
practice that goes with the policy here?
I think
Once the policy is approved, the guidelines automatically are
Right.
would be effective.
Right, but I mean,
So
are
up
the
until
guidelines,
now,
are they
we-
continuing to be developed, or have we got those, do you feel okay with the guideline? I mean, is that an ongoing process, or are we done with this conversation as far as you're concerned, for right now? With the guidelines?
the guidelines.
The guidelines, of
Yes,
course.
yes, we
Okay.
have some well-crafted guidelines at this point.
Okay.
Why wouldn't we want to raise it to the level of policy? I mean, why is guidelines sufficient for us?
That's,
I mean, maybe,
I think that goes back to our desire to have as much as possible, although the state legislature has been making it difficult for us the past few years, as much as possible to keep the policies at a minimum and allow the administrative guidelines, because they also need to change more frequently, allow them to drive the practice.
I actually think this is the way policy should be, period. I think that we put way too much into policy.
well, I wonder, how do we disseminate this information to parents and how do people know?
Fine.
If I'm a parent, how do I know what the guideline is relative to how you deal with my allergic child? My child with an allergy.
I
Because what
can't
the
answer that.
guidelines talked about responsibilities. And I'm just curious about how we know,
Are they in the student?
yeah, how do we know
Handbook,
about
yeah,
responsibilities?
A lot of it is those
Under
packets that
nursing and
kids
health
get at the
services.
beginning of the school year.
Okay.
I haven't seen these particular ones, but if it's something that's to pre-warn parents, to inform them, then that would be appropriate as part of the beginning information that goes to parents.
Yeah, this allergies is tough for me because I'm thinking that we and parents may not know that they have a child who's allergic to something until sort of after the fact. It's let it go, but I'm just it's an intriguing thing in terms of thinking about allergies because we know that people can die from these allergic reactions. So anyway.
I guess, to not, or to complicate matters more, is there a reason that this was limited to food allergies?
And not all kinds of allergies?
Well, I don't know. Because I like the idea that the responsibility line with the family, school, and students, but there are other, thinking other types of allergies and allergic reactions it's probably covered in the guidelines around, family members have a responsibility to make sure their kid has an EpiPen if they're allergic to bees and they're at those kinds of things, that's not just solely on the responsibility of the of the district, for
I'm thinking that
example.
perhaps Dr. Johnston might be able to help us a little
Yeah,
bit with
I'm-
this one in particular.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
This is one of those, certainly with allergies, that falls into our health services a great deal. Our nurses work a great deal with this, with our food service providers. And if you look at our information system, our student record, oftentimes, if a student has an allergy, it's noted as a health plan, and there's an allergy. So there is communication that goes on oftentimes through the nurse, and then there's communication with food services about how to meet that student's need. But we can
But
get
that
more
form
information
doesn't
for you.
refer just to a food allergy, is what I'm saying.
Right, I mean,
Any allergy.
we can get more information for you. Yes, it would involve any allergy. That
Right.
would require a health plan that needs to be
Right.
implemented at school, where there needs to be awareness to the staff.
The staff.
Right.
Right. So anyway, I think we ought to consider that coming back. I don't know. What do you think, Steve? You've been working on this, whether this should be broader, not just food allergy plan.
We can
Policy, I
certainly,
mean,
we can
policy.
certainly investigate that. Yeah.
Just one thing, I guess this goes back to my first question. I mean, we have
Use the
policy
mic.
five, I'm sorry, we have policy 5335, which is care of students with chronic health conditions. And we've elevated this to a food allergy policy, which again, I'm not in any way minimizing the importance of it, but I guess I'm thinking that a policy that deals with the care of students with chronic health conditions should be covering all these things. And so now, once you elevate this one, do you wind up having to elevate other things as well? And that's, I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just asking the question, because I think what Nancy's asking is, where is it that people handle all these different types of allergies? Maybe it already is handled. I don't have 5335 in front of me, so it could already be in there.
Perhaps one of the things we can look at for the second reading is how it lines up in
Right.
5335 to insert this
Perfect.
wording.
Yeah,
Yep.
good,
The
good. That's-
guidelines will be implemented the same way.
Right, I think that's
Right.
great.
Well, keep in mind, food, I think part of the rationale may be, and again, I'm guessing, is food is something that students bring to the building. The other allergies you have, or may have, I think are less likely that something that I shouldn't say a lot of students are gonna bring from home every day. So I think because of food is a kind of, it's very community oriented, so you might share something with someone else. Other allergies may be a bee sting, the students don't bring those to school. The same way if you had like a latex allergy. I mean, I think the other allergies are gonna be very, very narrow, whereas food could be very, hey, have a piece of my sandwich, then boom, something happens. So that might, again, I'm speculating, food may be the one because everyone's doing it versus the other ones. Again, I'm speculating.
Well, it doesn't hurt for us to take a peek, so I think we ought to take a peek when we come back and say we peeked and this is what it looks like.
Thank you, and we'll bring this back. Next one, 5340. Again, doesn't have any decision boxes. It's another one that is aligning to the the whole issue with concussions and head injuries.
Now, the Department of Health issues this once a year or more often, or what do we know about that? I guess anytime they would issue any kind of change to the protocol, we get notified. Is that right?
I would have to, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if it's on an annual basis.
We might ask the athletic director what she might know about this. Because
I thought
somehow
you were
it
referring to
seemed
the
that we.
first one.
So
On
what?
an annual basis,
Is that
shall review.
Student access.
Yeah,
That we
but-
would be reviewing that, but, when the Ohio Department of Health changes that sheet, that's something, I don't know what their process is.
So at the beginning of school year, we think we get a set of these that we share with our staff. And then we
Then we
make
would-
sure that they review them at the beginning of the year.
We could do that electronically, like we do a lot of our compliance things.
Okay. When we hire somebody, like, we do a lot of those supplementals, sort of lump all together. Do we take the time to work with those individuals and make sure that they have this information?
If they're a coach, they have to.
Okay, so the people that we
There's
just.
a whole body, and the athletic director keeps those records.
Okay.
next one is care of school property. And this one, you'll see the change, it's one of the few that's one page. You'll see on the description, it's, which one?
So if a
Regarding-
student 18 years old or older damages property, and are we saying that we would go after them as opposed to the parent? Is that, I
Could
mean,
both be liable, that's what it says.
is it?
Also liable.
It says that except the student 18 years or older shall also, okay. So we can go after both of them.
Let's see. And that's, all of these check marks, I was just checking what we have currently, is exactly the same of what's in our current policy.
Okay.
The only change would be to the extent permitted by law. Anti-harassment is the exact same one we've talked about already in those previous, but the student version of anti-harassment's in this section.
Is that checkbox in bold, does that mean we're checking it? What?
No, it's just a new
option.
opportunity,
Oh,
a new
okay,
option to
okay.
check it. And we stayed consistent with the other three that we had. And on page 8 is the same list of names, also published on the district's website. Pardon me?
They're different names, aren't they?
They are.
Are
Different
they
names for students,
Yeah, they are
different names?
for students.
More to post on the website.
Understandable.
Also back on 7, page 7, do we need to, if this sentence, the top paragraph, if that's in there, doesn't it have to end with one of those two possible checks? At his or her first convenience, or within two, this is page 7, the top paragraph.
Yeah, I think you're right. We have to choose one.
Right, we missed that.
I think in the previous ones, wasn't it 2 days?
Yes, that's right.
Go check that. That's interesting, and the other one, it says promptly.
Ah.
So for students, they want it more defined. So 2 days seems reasonable. 2 days. Thank you. And on page 15 is the decision of the superintendent shall be final, same as the others. Anything else for this one? One is bullying and other forms of aggressive behavior, 5517.01. And the note from Neola is that the changes here are to put this in alignment with the anti-harassment policy. Language on page 3. And if you take a look at page 7, there was a checkbox that was checked, but then we scribbled it off on to make sure that you noted that that was removed.
So how does
Because
that?
it says
how does
to
it
the
read
extent,
now?
because we do not have that now, because.
But how does it read now then? Does it end on the word policy? The rest of
Yes.
that doesn't
Yes.
exist?
Yes,
Okay.
there's a period at policy. We've never just allocated state, federal funds for that, so that was a mistake.
So what it basically says, we have to do it regardless of whether we got state or federal funds to do it.
Yes,
Is that what it means?
well, it means that if you check that, then it would only be with the appropriations for state and federal funds.
Right.
So
But we're
a
not.
grant line
Yeah.
item.
Right.
We've never done that.
How do we deal with these age-appropriate instructions related to dating violence and so on? How do we deliver that? Is that part of a health curriculum, or where does that
Dr.
fit?
Johnston?
It's covered within health curriculum, but also, in particular, we have groups, we call targeted groups for
Jeff, can you scoot
boys.
the
I'm
mic?
sorry. Targeted groups for boys and for girls, Girls Council, Boys Council, where we do more intensive.
Is that for
Services.
everybody,
No, I mean, the original, the core curriculum addresses the broader category, but then for kids who require more assistance in those areas, we have specific girls group and the specific boys groups.
So I've got 5 children. Make that 6. 1 in each grade,
Right.
7 through 12. So each one of them will receive some kind of instruction in a classroom setting around this issue.
Right, and what I'd have to provide for you in the second reading is the extent of all that within the health curriculum. But if that's where the core instructional piece that would be taking place would be within health. Yeah. But what each component of that is at each one of those grades is going to differ, of course, but.
So health is taken in each one of those? But so I guess that's what I was
That's right.
trying to get at.
Yeah.
Is
I'd have to confirm that for you.
Yeah,
What the
I-
offerings are for 7 through 12.
Right.
And how they access it, because I know it's on a.
right, and
rotating schedule.
I guess the issue is we think somebody that was in the 8th grade, and now they're at the high school that they had it in the 8th grade, so they're not getting it in the 9th grade. You know, it's that kind of question.
Okay.
If they come into the district in the 10th grade, do we assume that they already had it, or are we making sure that they get it at 10th grade?
Right.
You know, that's the question that I'm asking.
Okay. Yep.
Ready for the next one? Student, coming close to the end of a section. Student fees, fines, and charges. And that is 6152. And that new language is to align with 5513 that we just discussed. Where you see on page 2 the check marks, that's current policy. And it's the one I was talking about. The very next one, it says school fees do not include. We never had that because here's what they are, and if it's not on the list, it's not. And the new required language is at the end of page 4. Okay, onward to the last section. Round third coming up. 3120, employment of professional staff. Check marks are the current check marks. You'll see from the Neola summary, purpose here is to designate an individual other than the superintendent to make nominations to the board concerning employment of teachers if the nominee is related to the superintendent. That was also part of House Bill 59.
Joe, we list these people that, these positions that are considered members of the professional staff. And we've got professional staff written under that. What are we trying to do? Do you know what I'm saying, asking you?
Yeah, I believe when we put this down is that we have teachers and everybody in the teacher's contract, and the administrator's contract has administrators and professional staff that aren't necessarily administrators. I think that's what
So
we
it's our
tried to do.
internal working, our definition of professional staff.
Right.
It just does sound odd
It-
with it being, professional staff being the
Professional
the
staff.
heading,
Under professional.
but,
We could try to reword that.
but
We're trying to be specific.
What are these, are they tradespeople? Are they doctors, lawyers, psychiatrists? Who are these professional
Oh,
staff we're talking about?
Like our EMIS coordinator, or no, that's not a good example. She's in the teacher's bargaining unit. Betsy, IT, some of the IT.
People who don't necessarily have supervisory responsibilities but are administrators.
Some in your
Transportation
department.
supervisor.
Okay,
that aren't covered in the administrative.
they're not covered by any unions?
They are in the
They are.
administrative unit.
Oh, okay,
But
okay,
are not
okay.
by legal definition an administrator.
It is confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know the answer, but it would,
But we will try to find better wording.
Sure.
What was the reasoning? Again, I don't necessarily disagree with it, but what's the reasoning behind not checking that at the top of page 2? I mean, obviously, it would limit our hiring choices, but I didn't know if there's we just decided there wasn't enough conflict of interest in hiring
The reason,
brothers, sisters,
reasoning was
children
we just
of-
paralleled current policy. It's always up to you if you'd like to include it.
just, I don't know. I pondered on it for a while. I don't particularly need to include it. I wondered about the pros and cons.
I don't know, Eric. I mean, I'm thinking it might be a good idea to check that first box. The board members, I mean, I just think,
Why the first one but not the second one?
well, the second one, and I feel badly, I feel like for the audience, I need to say, we're talking about whether the district can employ children, siblings, spouse, parents, in-laws, or dependents of board members, and then the second one being of regular full-time professional staff members. I don't have as hard of a time as staff members because I don't feel like there would be any necessary, I think that in theory, the pressure that a superintendent or an administrator might feel to hire a child or a spouse of a board member would be very different than that they might feel from another employee saying my husband's a teacher or my, wife is a bus driver.
The only occasion I can recall in the last 20 years that this was an issue was Chris Sumner's, who was on the school board, her sister was a teacher. And whenever there was anything there was a vote, she would always, and specifically referenced her sister, she would abstain from that vote, and she would reference the reason why she was abstaining from the vote.
Yeah.
So that's the only occasion I can recall in the last 20 or 25 years that that's actually even been an issue.
Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't happen often. I hadn't really thought about it till you asked it, Eric, but I don't know what other people think.
Well, the only reason I didn't think, this is probably putting too much faith in whatever, but I guess I would think that any thoughtful board would consider, this is forcing the issue. This forces it, makes it that you can't do it.
Yeah.
I would think that just like your example, Eric, it was thought through, everyone knew what was going on. The board member in question recused herself from the vote in some way. I could go either way, and I understand your point, Nancy.
Well, I guess the question is, does it give us, does it mean that we have to spend more time thinking about these relatives and how they fit? I mean, I don't know one way or the other if we would do any more if we check these boxes than we would do anyway. I'm not sure,
Well,
but I don't have any problem either way it goes.
Again, I'm fine either way also. What checking the box would do is take it off the table as even an option. And I'm not sure that's the right decision either, but it just,
We can leave it until we have a problem. First time it becomes like a major issue, then we decide, okay, let's go back to that policy and fix that.
depends on who it is.
Well, that's one of the things,
That's right, exactly.
I don't think we've ever had, when I was here, there was the scandals, the Board of Ed influencing things. When I hear stuff in the media, I'm like, geez, I can't recall the Board of Ed having any ability to steer this or that. I mean, that, to me, the same thing here. I remember when people would say, interested in a position, I would say, hey, Linda Koenig, here's this person, she was the HR director, and that's the degree that I can involvement with. So I don't know, I can totally understand children and spouse, but then when we move to in-laws, siblings, it becomes, I think, more of a murkier area. So I can only recall one occasion in the last 20 years where it was even remotely an issue. So I don't know that, we need to codify it or not. I don't know. It's, of course, then again, I have no spouse or siblings, so therefore it doesn't really.
I think we can come back at it, at the next meeting and maybe hear the administration's, it sounds like your preference is to leave it unchecked.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm comfortable with that. I think it,
Next one is,
Just a quick question.
yes,
Do we use these background checks? It says they must pass a background check by the FBI and the BCI.
and that we would
Yes.
need.
They have to do, but we do both of those
Yes.
now? Those cost us, don't
They cost the employee.
they? Okay.
next one is standards-based teacher evaluation, which you passed in June. This is OTES. There's only, matter of fact, Neola does not have a template for this because every district follows the guidelines. We actually worked through this with Mr. Britton and our teachers union and came to agreement of that as part of negotiations. There's only two changes. The word proficient is changed to skilled. An example of that's on page 3, and it's also in some of the charts. The other change is on page 6, where it was 60 days or more unexcused absence was changed to 45 excused or unexcused. Those are the
Page,
two.
which was, where was that?
It's on page 6 at the top. And any other time in this policy where the word proficient was skilled is now taking its place. And we'll see this one again next time we're sitting around the table, because there's the other statute working its way through the legislature, which is going to make more changes. The next one is 7300, disposition of real property.
I've got a couple questions, but that's probably just for me to get
Sure.
up to speed compared to my colleagues. Just for clarification, 7300, page 4, and then page 5. I just want to make sure I understand. If the district, because this is going to be something coming in the next few years in regards to the potential of, hey, we have a building that's vacant. If we want to sell a school building, or I'm sorry, a building that could be by the Ohio Revised Code viewed as, if it's got Taylor has been completely modified, but still could be viewed as
Yeah.
classroom space. If we want to sell a building like that, we first have to offer it to a startup school or even an existing, we have to say, hey, if they want, they get a first
Ask
crack
Mr.
at it.
Shigalis to come up.
That's, I understand.
I want to ask about food allergies again.
So if we want to sell a school building, we first have to say, hey, any community group, if you
No,
want,
if-
or any charter school
If
or,
it exists in the district,
Right, they have to be in
it
the
has to
district.
be in the boundaries.
okay, it has to be in the boundaries. And then if they offer us the assessed fair market value, whatever that amount is, if they offer that, we are obligated to accept it. Correct. They have right of first refusal. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
Okay. Then moving forward, we're thinking one step ahead then. If there's a building on a piece of property, we demolish the building, then that negates that requirement, correct?
Yes.
So now it's becoming, it's basically a vacant lot, its value diminishes.
Well, you're straying into an area that is beyond my area of expertise. Is it permissible for a school district to demolish a building to avoid the requirement?
I didn't say
To
avoid.
offer, well,
I was
but that's where we're kind of headed. I don't know that. I don't know that. And is it permissible, let's not use the word avoid, is it permissible for a district to demolish a building without first offering that building, all right? I don't know that. That would be a legal question that
Okay.
I would suggest that we get some advice on.
That's what I was trying to get clarity on, because it was sort of like,
Yeah.
once it's a building, it's always a building. By that, we tore down Roosevelt, we still own the land. But
Right.
I wanted to make sure that there wasn't the Ohio Revised Code saying, no, you can't tear that building down unless you offer it to somebody first.
I think based on our past experience, the way this works is it depends on what your intention is.
Okay.
So as Steve is kind of alluding to, if you want to keep the land, but you don't want to maintain a building there,
Right.
fine.
Okay.
But if you have some intention of reselling the
Okay.
land, I think that you do have an obligation to with the piece of property on it.
So it's basically what your intent for the land.
I believe that's been the case in the
Okay.
past. I don't know if that's changed. We would have.
Well, and again, because theoretically, within a few years, we are going to have this kind of a discussion. That's why I was curious as to, the board may want to do one thing with it or see the land one way, but if the law says, hey, you can't do that, then.
But we don't have an operating charter school within the district at this
Okay,
time.
Okay.
So, but it's an excellent point, and it's one that is
Now,
is important for us to,
so basically, they're saying, so it's charter school as opposed to private school.
Right,
So
right.
So Beaumont wouldn't be.
No.
no,
Okay, so basically.
It
it has
was
to be-
Greater Heights Academy, and now.
it
there
was
is no-
Greater Heights
Okay,
Academy. It
gotcha.
was the only one, the last one functioning in the district.
So theoretically, there's only one restriction, which would be a charter school. If there's no charter school within your boundaries, then that's off the table, so then it only really restricts you in regards to charter schools. No charter school, then you've got carte blanche, okay. That was,
Well, it restricts you in terms of another school, but I don't know what it is. And that is a college preparatory boarding school.
which is.
We don't have any of those anywhere, do we?
No. Okay. That was my only question, because like I said, because I'm just thinking, because you folks have had more of that in the last couple of years than myself, and I wanted to get clarity on what the Ohio Revised Code was saying. That was it. I think the rest of it's all boilerplate.
By not checking anything on the bottom of page 2, are we, again, is this one of those things where it's, we can do that, but we're not promising to advertise in a newspaper or posting the notice? I mean, do we need to make that, obviously, I guess we don't have to make that promise, or we check one of these. But if we are going to auction something off, there's no legal requirement that we do either of those
I think we
things?
do have, that's a good catch there, Eric. I think we need to check that, Joe.
First one?
I think on page 2,
This one right here.
yeah, I think we have to check one of those, and we would check
so-
publication in a
Otherwise,
newspaper,
we don't
general
have to notice
circulation
anywhere.
has been our
Tell
normal
each other we're doing it.
procedure, yes, so.
And then again, I didn't know, half step off on page 3, by not checking any of those as well, does this mean all our options are open, or that we,
I would read that as all our options are open, and that's what I would recommend that we do, and not check any of those.
okay.
Right?
So what did you say? Say that again.
That by not checking them, it leaves all of our options wide open to do whatever we want to do.
So that would just end with the words private sale?
That's correct.
B, and the
That's
everything else is
correct.
gone.
Okay.
I would agree.
When it gets on page 8, so if we were to sell a piece of property, because I know, again, actually, I got a meeting tomorrow night on a piece of property we sold before. If we sell something, and whatever money we get from it can only be spent on other facilities,
That's correct.
and not even maintenance, or it says.
It could be maintenance.
But it says non-operating capital expenses.
Yep, that's the change,
Yeah.
where you can now put in non-operating related to technology, infrastructure, and equipment used for instruction and assessment.
Right.
Is it 3 things it could be used for?
Only pay for the cost of non-operating capital
Well,
expenses.
the way it reads now, it says capital and maintenance fund. Is that to be considered our PI fund? Is that the way to think about it, Steve?
I'm sorry, Ron, can you say that again?
Well, it says that it can be used, any proceeds in excess of the funds may be paid into the district's capital and maintenance fund. Is that referencing our PI
Yes.
fund?
Yes, yes.
But
That's
then
how I would read that.
But it can only be
Yes.
used for technology, infrastructure, and equipment. So theoretically, then, it's not, I mean, I guess you couldn't use it for, if you needed a new driveway, if you needed a new structural components, unless it was particularly specific. I
You
mean,
could
that's-
use it for that.
No, it's.
No, it says
it's-
only expenses
Once
related
you
to
paid off the
technology,
debt.
infrastructure, and equipment to be used
I
for
read
instruction and
similar,
assessment.
yeah.
So maybe,
Well, it seems like there's 2 things here that it can be used for.
what are the
If
two
you look
things?
at the Neola blurb on the cover sheet, it specifically addresses that. Policy 7300 disposition of real property, it's at the bottom of the page.
Limits other funds, yeah.
So it's basically, it's
Yeah.
technology, but, so if you wanted to put a new roof, you couldn't, it wouldn't be applicable. But if you wanted to run if you were putting a new server farm or wiring or Wi-Fi, all that would be covered. But you couldn't put a new driveway in or a new roof, if I'm understanding this correctly.
So this would represent a change in.
It says that
70
it's limiting
Right.
it.
It is, yeah.
So it represent a change in what it says
Need
at the
the
bottom of
driveway
the
to get
page.
to the server farm.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's-
But, Joe, it represents a change then from what we have right now, even the bold language.
Right.
In other words, if we
Yes.
use it for PI, then it could be used for, but this says it can't be used for any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Would that necessitate a separate fund be created within PI that's only for technology, infrastructure?
Pay for technology infrastructure out of PI.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So
Right.
it would
Right,
be.
but
I think
But
it could
this-
go
so
into
just a
that.
separate accounting for
Right.
that.
Probably
Right.
use a special cost center within the
Yeah.
Right.
PI fund.
You would
to
draw
make
down
sure that
from.
this is
Okay, and
spent
I
the way
guess
it
let's
is.
just make absolutely sure
Yeah.
that that's where we're headed.
First, we have to have something to sell that we'd actually, yeah. It's a theoretical moot question.
Next one, school calendar, has a lot of changes, probably more changes than Ohio's school calendar ever has. Doesn't take effect till next year. We're still learning about it. We've gone to meetings, we've gone to webinars. And it basically changes days of instruction to hours. In some ways, it provides more flexibility, but it's still a year from now. We haven't really been able to think through everything.
And it's a year from now and
Next
based
school
on
year.
our, right, and based on our
Collective bargaining.
contract.
Yes.
Our
Yeah.
bargaining agreement.
Right.
Right.
On the bottom of the page, we're being mandated to create an observation of Veterans Day for 1 hour.
Yep.
You got it?
Is that the only holiday that we are being mandated?
We've had Constitution Day for a while too, which was mandated in,
Okay, I wasn't sure.
yeah, yeah, it's,
So Veterans Day and Constitution Day. Is there anything-
Veterans Day is in November?
I just find it interesting what Columbus is mandating that we,
We can determine the specific activities
Right, I
that
just-
constitute the observance.
I
That
just-
could be.
in the pantheon of things that we're instructed, we have, yeah. I don't disagree with the concept, I just.
and you'll see on page 2, there is a decision box there that we're recommending.
So the way this is really unfolding is that when we talk about the calendar, we have to have a public meeting that talks about how many days we're gonna be there, how many hours. And do we have to talk cumulative hours? Or, I guess one question I should ask this question. Instead of us making up days, our idea now would be to make up hours.
Yes, and they actually define how many hours for elementary, how many hours for secondary as the minimum. We are, like most school districts, we are well over that.
So it could be that if we took off a snow day, it could be we would still be within our range of hours that we have to have instruction.
Yeah.
Or we could, even if we were to fall below that number, we could make that up in increments.
Yes.
We could have 30 minutes
Yeah, we
for
would
a
have-
week and
yeah.
have 2.5 more hours to make up for those 3 hours that we missed.
From the standpoint of hours, we're in pretty good shape, because if you remember, a couple of years ago, we actually increased the hours of elementary.
Right.
Or we can do what's on page 3 of this with the web and the blizzard bags.
That's what I was. Is that the ultimate, I mean, that was my question. Where is this ultimately going? Because when we talked about beginning to think in terms of hours instead of days, a few years ago or last year, it was moving toward that idea of different learning styles and the people who could, maybe there were students who could get the same hours online, but, and how we would meet those with days and whatever. Is that where the state is going as well, or are they after something else in terms of teacher contracts or something with hours? I mean, why? Do we have any sense?
I think just from what we've heard, they're trying to provide more flexibility
For everybody
For
or for
everybody.
students?
for
or-
everybody, because right now, you're locked into a certain number of days.
Right.
And those days are very similar across the board. Different people call different holidays. And we have the calamity days, and at one point, calamity days went from 5 to 3, then they were supposed to be abolished. This kind of says, now we're going to work by hours. You know, conspiracy theory might say that it's a different way to attack funding down the road.
But we define how many hours it takes to make a day, right?
Every district defined. What the state does is have the number of hours for the year. For a complete school year, this is how many you have, and then for elementary, I believe it's 5, secondary 5.5, I don't have that exactly. And you have to, and then you take out time for recess for kids, and you take out time for lunch. So they have a formula.
Well, the reason I raise that is because we are limited to how many days, how many hours, or how many days, or whatever, how many hours you can make up would be the equivalent of the number of hours that are the equivalent to 3 school days. So we have to define school days at the same time that we're talking about hours, right? In other words, it's 5 days in elementary school, then the number of hours somebody could make up would be 15 hours. You know what I'm asking?
No.
He's referring to
sorry.
on page 3, right? The blizzard bags, what's available
right.
online, and then.
Yeah, we weren't planning on getting involved in any of that. I mean, the whole concept of blizzard bags
Oh,
is that
but-
if you're,
I see. So because it's not checked, even though we have this bold language, this is
it's
not us.
just, it's bold language as another new option.
Okay.
But you don't have to. We've stayed away from the blizzard bags. The whole concept that
What's a blizzard
we
bag?
want you to learn
Paper
while
copies,
you're at
lessons
home,
plans posted
and we're
online.
gonna set up what you're gonna learn 6 months ahead of time.
call it a blizzard
Now, that's busy work by anybody's definition.
You know, you go home, you take this home, and when you have a snow day, reach in that bag.
Somehow that and the digital era doesn't coincide. Any other questions on this? And we'll be coming back to this more, well beyond policy, simply because it's new. Eight three nine zero.
Well, the one question that I have real quickly
Yes,
has
sir.
to do with this. You know, we have a calendar committee. So the whole notion of how the calendar committee operates now becomes different.
Once this goes into effect, but
Yeah.
we do have a bargaining agreement that was signed before this went into effect.
So did
others
the
push us out.
bargaining agreement overrides this until we
Next
until we
agreement.
get the next agreement?
I believe it overrides the whole thing, but again, we've gone, whether it's the whole thing or just sections, we don't know for sure yet.
Okay.
But it appears the whole thing. Which we also need clarification on, because if they say no snow days next year, but you're not on hours, what does that mean? Like I said, stay tuned. Animals on district policy, different district property. This is a new one. You'll see the summary, dealing with service animals. There were a couple check boxes.
I love it. Animal includes any living creature that is not a human being. So you can't bring your ants to school anymore.
Any service ants,
That's right. Ants are,
plants.
right? Are they vaccinated?
Those are insects.
Thank you.
No. An animal is anything that's not human.
What if it's a zombie?
Any living
You'll
creatures?
see one, we recommended a checkbox on page 5.
Transportation.
And then from the standpoint of page 6, suspension of transportation privileges, superintendent.
So, because I had one community member complain about something related to this issue recently. Can you go to page 3 of 8390, this B? I just want to understand, B would mean that, before animals would be allowed, like
Which-
therapy dogs,
On the bottom or be on the top?
Be at the bottom.
be at the top, I'm sorry. Yeah, which is
It'd be
under
4.
animals in school and elsewhere on district property, be at the top. That means that family members, parents would be notified before they would be allowed in the classroom for any reason. Is how I read that.
That's what it says.
Okay.
Yes.
So part of the allowing the animal to be present has to do with going through and making sure that it's appropriate administratively or at the administrative level. And then you have to have the notification as well.
Yeah, and part of a brand-new policy, like any brand-new policy, is it's more work that we then do in disseminating the information and the guidelines.
Do we have any service animals now? We should have one.
Service
Yeah, we don't, do we have any of this now?
I don't know, Jeff.
You don't think so?
I just wanted you mentioned, I think the therapy dog at Boulevard.
Yeah.
Not a service dog per se, but.
Yeah, it was described to me, the situation at Boulevard was described as a therapy dog, not a service dog, but that was a parent's
Yeah, I've seen that.
description, so I don't know which it would be considered. To me,
I don't know.
they would need to be handled two different ways. Because if we're talking about I had understood it to be a therapy dog, meaning had more curricular implications. I didn't understand it to be a service dog, but
There may be even another name for it, and I can't remember it right now because I've seen individuals who have PTSD have this like companion dog for therapy purposes. I'm not sure what the exact language is, but I have actually seen it. And, we had to wrestle with that a little bit. What's the difference? How do you talk about, somebody that's a service dog versus somebody that's, I think they call them companion dogs or something like that, and I'm not sure. I think you have to have something within their IEP or something that suggests that they would have to have them. You familiar with any of this?
Well, I know that they're typically within the plan, but I'm not aware of, other than the Boulevard situation, us having service dogs as defined here.
But the way that I'm reading this, and maybe I'm getting too in the weeds on this, the way that I'm reading it, if you go to page 2 of 7, the second paragraph under animals in schools and elsewhere on district property, I'm reading this as two distinct categories. There's service dogs, and then there are animals, and then there are animals that the principal may permit to be present to support curriculum-related projects and activities. I understand this to have two different categories.
Well, that would be like you have eggs that you hatch for chickens versus.
Little bunny rabbits.
Yeah, exactly. You got a classroom science project with
Right.
an animal versus a
Right.
service dog. I mean, those are, Then the therapy dog would sort of fall in between. But I think I view it as a service animal being a student who, like a seeing eye dog. Because I don't know how many other service animals.
Well, I think
But do we need to notify every family member in the classroom if there's going to be a child with a service dog?
Well, that would go probably to the allergies component then.
Yeah.
Actually, any of the animals theoretically would have components with the allergies.
True. Okay.
Ready for environmental health and safety issues? And if you'll see on the summary from Neola, this policy is revised to delete language dealing with animals in the classroom or on school property because of the previous policy. And that is the only change.
You mean that part on the top of 3.5? And the bottom of 2.5, I guess.
Next policy is 8462, student abuse and neglect. See from the overview, requirement that youth suicide awareness prevention be included in the mandated in-service education for district staff. And we've had child abuse and neglect, and we've had additional things on top of that, and this is the most recent.
The abuse and neglect, I guess, are kind of interesting. We're mandated reports, aren't we?
Yes.
So in this piece, we're actually reporting to outside agency, or do we have to report it internally as well?
Outside agency is by law internally, it may be an individual reports to another individual, but that has to go directly to the outside agency.
So all of our staff would be, would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
trained to do that?
Yes. That's been around for a long time now. Anything else for this one? Moving into wellness, 8510. Again, this is another one from the summary that's being updated as regards to the concussion discussion that we've had.
I understand it means by checking any of this long list of possibilities, checking would mean more work for the district, but I guess I'd just like to go on record as supporting things like nutrition education shall extend beyond the classroom by engaging and involving the school's food service staff. And nutrition education standards and benchmarks promote the benefit of a balanced diet that includes fruits, vegetables, whole grain products, low-fat and fat-free dairy products. I mean, there's some of these that don't, that I understand we could do them. There's no, if we don't put them in policy. And to Cal's point, why get that specific with policy? I can see why not, but I would hope that, in general, I would support some
Well,
of these.
on page 12, we get pretty specific about the actual nutrition aspect. This is kind of a wide-ranging policy, and this is pretty much in compliance with, where the federal government is going with the Child Nutrition Act and the Free and Reduced Lunch Program. And so we've, in reviewing this with Chartwell's, who's our food service consultant and provider for management services, we talked about checking these items, because those are things we are in fact doing and heavily promoting.
Which helps.
So
yeah,
if we
those are
think
good.
about this whole section, and we think that it's standards-based, is it based on the Child Nutrition Act or some other standards that we're talking about?
Some parts of it are, but I couldn't tell you that all of it is. I don't know enough to know that, but some of it is, yes. And Joe,
So where
I
would the
don't know.
standards, where would they come from? Is it the Department of Education, Department of Health? Where would the standards
Well,
come
the
from?
Child Nutrition Act is a federal law.
I understand
So
that,
that's the-
but we're referencing standards-based. When, are we, is this the standards that we're using? Are they contained within the Child Nutrition Law, or is it some other thing that we're dealing with? A Child Nutrition Act, I guess.
Which
Well, it's actually on the first page. It's the only one that we checked out of those series of things that Eric was talking about. It says that the education shall be included in the health curriculum so that the instruction is sequential and standards-based,
Looking at the first one.
and provide students with the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to lead healthy lives. I don't have any clue what the standards would look like.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, where do we get them? For example, I think there's probably around the standards base, there may be a certain level of physical activity that we would expect a child to be engaged in over some period of time.
Actually, I can address this, because the last time I did curriculum is when, in the health curriculum, they actually put a requirement, this ODE did through the content standards, to include a unit on nutrition education that is mandatory at the middle school level.
That's the standard.
So we've tried to keep away from the curricular checkpoints because they're either covered in the phys ed content standards and the health content standards, but all of these areas now do have standards that are instructional.
Okay. But I think the fact that we took a whole section of policy to address this means that it's been elevated beyond what we normally think about it, doesn't it?
You're talking about wellness?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we've had wellness, it's been mandated for, how many years? I don't know, quite a few. And this basically is the policy that's been in place. And again, Neola sends it back in template form, and we've rechecked basically the things we checked previously, other than, there may be a change or two. Mostly the changes are in the bold.
The policy that we last revised in January of 12 is exactly that.
Yeah.
It's that first paragraph, and then it says, with regards to nutrition education, the district shall, and then nutrition education shall be included in the health curriculum so that instruction is sequential.
Right. This is pretty much
We
identical.
replicated what we already have, what
Right.
we passed a year and a half ago. And then it goes into physical education.
Okay.
Can you go to page 13 of 18 and walk us through those cross-outs to make sure I got them?
Or yeses, the next two are no's.
Related to nutrition promotion?
Oh, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where we had, in our work, we began by indicating it and then determined not to.
So the way I'm reading it, you are saying the district will eliminate trans fat from school meals.
No, that, we did not check eliminate trans fat from school meals, and we did not check require students to select a fruit or vegetable as a part of a complete reimbursable meal. We originally checked it, and then we crossed it off. and
Which
then you see
ones
the
are
note.
checked? Okay,
So go
top to
back to
bottom.
the other
Which ones
page.
are, top to bottom, which ones are checked off?
Top to bottom, the first one checked on page 13 is the district nutrition department will promote and encourage
So all these are
farm-to-school
no's.
efforts in
Those are
order
all?
to provide.
Is the next one checked?
The next one is checked by the 2014-15 school year.
Is
The next
rewarding-
one is not checked.
Rewarding children is not
Yeah,
checked. So
probably
there's only,
because of these, we probably should have just redone the page.
so there's only two that are checked, the district nutrition department and by the
Yes.
14-15, okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me about why the administration decided we should leave in the rewarding children in the classroom with candy. I mean, I know you're not promoting it, you're allowing it.
No, we took that off.
Took it out.
We took that off.
We're not
That's-
checking it.
It's
Yeah.
it's
not
saying
checked.
that
My
it's back
apologies.
in.
I should have just redone this.
It's
whole
not
thing.
checked. The only two that are checked are,
The only two
No,
that
I
are
know.
checked.
Right, but this is
No, I
saying-
know,
Yes,
but
yes, yes,
what
it's
it's
okay.
saying by not
I agree with
checking
you. Oh,
is
should
it's
not.
okay to
You're saying
reward
it is
kids with
okay.
candy.
Right, I'm agreeing with, Nancy's right.
Matter of fact, we had a long debate about it.
I actually wanted it checked.
Teachers were doing it, that they're.
No,
they're
I get it. I
discouraged.
mean,
They're
it's just
trying to-
another, it's another thing
we
that
had-
we're setting
we had a
up
long
of
debate
trying to
We had a long
police it
debate
and all
about
that.
it.
I get it. I just want to hear it. I want to
The
understand.
consensus was, actually, this one, we did have a long debate
Yeah.
on. The consensus was not to promote it. The consensus was to educate not to, but to put it in policy was going beyond what we thought, what the consensus of the group was we should be doing. Steve argued to the end to leave it in there.
I did.
Well,
to
tell
And a
me
lot-
where
and a lot
you,
of
tell
it
me
we-
where you stand on trans fats. 'Cause-
And a lot of it is, you know, you promote, you educate, but how enforceable is it?
Yeah, no, I get it. But eliminating, telling Chartwells we're not gonna have trans fats, that's enforceable.
We didn't check that.
That's not checked.
That's not checked either.
I know, but that means it's okay.
It's not okay?
Well, it's not okay, but to put that in policy would really handcuff them at this point pretty hard in terms of their menu, so.
How so?
Just because it would limit the,
Food is eliminated.
totally eliminating trans fats out of every single food that we served in our cafeterias would really significantly limit the menu options for us. I mean, that's,
So you're saying it's better as a procedure than as a policy?
I think we're moving towards eliminating trans fats. They're doing that in a lot of places. But to check that and say, we're going to totally, because this says you are eliminating it, period. You will not serve any food that has a trans fat in it. That, what they're telling us, that's not really practical right now. I mean, so,
I'm surprised by that.
yeah. Again, the
I mean, I don't wanna
movement is
push it
towards
too hard,
eliminating
but I
them.
do wanna, I would like to ask that we,
Sure.
I would like to ask the question of how well, I don't know if this would be an administration nightmare to ask you this, and you guys can push back and tell me it would be, but are there other districts that have done this? Has Chartwell done this in other districts? To me, it seems like it, because of everything that, that one doesn't, as a non-food service person, I get it. It doesn't seem as
Well, I didn't ask
difficult.
them that question. So, but I'm suspecting that if they could do it here, or if they were doing it elsewhere, they probably would have said, yes, we'll do it. They're pretty consistent across their districts in terms of what they do as a corporation, so.
You didn't ask them whether they have other districts that they serve that have that policy? That's what you didn't ask
I
them?
didn't ask them
Sure,
that, and I
no, I
didn't
get
ask them if other districts have totally eliminated trans fats
Right.
from their
Yeah, yeah,
menu.
yeah. Okay.
I didn't ask them that. Yeah.
I don't know. Is anyone else interested in this one? If it's only
Yeah.
me, it's only me.
No, I am. I think that, I mean, if only because inevitably the response is always like, this isn't a good time to try that, right? I mean, from seatbelts in cars on whoever the manufacturer is, it's always like not a good time to, and I totally get the point that like it would severely restrict what we're able to offer, but I'd be
Boy, would I
curious
hear
if
from my
anybody else.
kids.
I just don't know
Just
if it is, and I understand that chances are they haven't done this somewhere else, or we would be one of the districts they would want to offer it to. But I would be curious to hear if other people have somehow found a way to do this. And it does feel like nationwide we're kind of inching our way that way. But if
Definitely.
whether we want to be at the forefront of that or bringing at the tail of that.
And again, I didn't even ask them, like what percentage of what we're serving or what kinds of foods still have that. I mean, I can get into all those details with them, to push back a little bit.
That it's minimal now.
It probably
I would
is.
guess,
Yeah,
just
probably is.
based on
Yeah.
people moving away from that just in product development, I would guess.
We can
But I'm just
push back
curious,
and
yeah.
get some more detail on this and see where
And
we
it
are.
also doesn't have to be in policy, but I would agree that just as a question raised, I mean, I would follow Nancy's point that, yeah, I would love to get more information on that, whether or not it's ever included in policy.
So what, this means that we can't sell chocolates for a fundraiser? Is that what that means?
Trans fats?
No.
No, I'm talking about the.
And we
other-
don't.
I thought we had got finished
Oh,
with that.
sorry.
So by the 2014-15 school year, it referenced fundraisers. So that's like chocolates, right? Which is
Well, wait,
a fan favorite.
that might be difficult for the concession stand at the football games.
Well, it's a question.
Oh, it's-
I mean,
But we would just want to know what the USDA competitive food regulations.
Well, and you'd want to know that, and also remember, it's only during the regular and extended school day.
Oh, okay.
So it wouldn't be like after school or evenings or weekends, right? So if you had a weekend fundraiser, theoretically, this isn't restricting that.
and so you could sell it at a football game.
Right.
Is that extended school day
I don't know.
experts?
I have a question about that one.
Yeah. I don't know the extended school day specifically.
Well, I mean, we should know, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
And then we go to the next one, the second last one. 9160, public attendance at school events.
I have a question on this. Obviously, we cannot have alcoholic beverages, I don't know what controlled substances we would have, but we can't have alcohol at school events. But if somebody books let's say someone books,
They can't have alcohol.
well, no, it says at any function sponsored by the district. My question would be, is if an organization books the auditorium, are they allowed to, I always was told that we couldn't have alcohol on our property ever. This doesn't read that way, does it?
No, I think
When you check, you're right.
it may be that we're checking the other box. Can we, that's a
Was that
question.
oversight,
I mean, we don't allow that, do we?
Yeah.
Because years ago, when there was community services, they had a wine tasting class. They had to eliminate the wine tasting class because they couldn't have alcohol at school property. We always tell reunions, you don't want to bother having your event at the high school because you can't have alcohol.
But, Mr. Alumni Foundation, I do want to be careful that would it be interpreted, the first one, at any function sponsored by the district? If the district were to sponsor, buy a table or anything like that,
Well,
sponsored,
But no,
What does that mean?
what I'm saying is, any function occurring on board property,
no, I know,
Oh,
I
oh,
agree, we need to check that.
that's not the board, that's board
yeah.
members, that's not the district.
Yeah, I'm saying in theory, if the district, I know, the board member, we pay for that out of our own
Because
pockets.
you-
I mean, if there were any, is there ever a time that the district sponsors anything like that? No?
Because then you'd be playing favoritism regarding organizations. Like, I guess the
There's
question.
no time, like buying a table to something isn't considered sponsoring an event?
Not by the, unless it's by the district. District.
Individuals, not
Does what?
the district didn't sponsor it, the individuals.
No,
did.
I get that.
Do
I'm
we-
saying, is there ever a time that the district writes a check to sponsor an event where there's alcohol
Well,
served?
I would, my personal preference would be you want to eliminate
Okay.
any function occurring on board property.
I agree, I agree.
Because that saves you, that means that eliminates a lot of organizations who might want to reserve a venue.
And I think it's consistent with our present at least practice.
Oh, wait, no, you're saying we shouldn't check that.
You should have, no, I'm saying check any function occurring on board property. You want zero tolerance of alcohol on
Oh,
your property,
do that.
because theoretically, if somebody was having an event, if they have alcohol at their event, they may be more inclined to reserve your spaces, and then you got a whole, who knows what's gonna happen. If you say no alcohol,
Oh.
that's gonna reduce utilization of
You're
your
saying
facility.
check just that one or both?
I would say both. I don't know
Yeah,
what,
I would say
you know,
both, too.
there's
Yeah,
no
okay,
functions
good.
that you would.
I would say both too.
Yeah,
I
okay,
just
okay,
wanted to
okay.
make sure that there wasn't something currently happening there.
Good with that.
When the teachers union sponsor their event, that's just theirs, right? And when the Alumni Foundation sponsors their Hall of Fame event, that's just yours, right?
Yes.
Because I know you have alcohol there.
That's that actually is that event is actually a district event. We do all the heavy lifting. If that's the case, I don't know that it's sponsored by.
Well, the reason I bring that up is that Alumni Foundation out of Lander Haven a function sponsored by the district?
That is actually a district event. If that's we can always just tell Lander Haven no alcohol.
I think we have to now.
Right. If that's.
Well,
We would have to if we check that, but that's exactly what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
We would have to if we check that. I mean, I don't know that we want to, I don't know that if the Alumni Hall of Fame event historically has that as part of the gala event, which I've not been to, I'm not sure that we want to say any board any district-sponsored
Oh.
event.
Well, I take the opposite. I'd say we should stop
We just mean we
selling
should,
alcohol there.
okay.
Well, actually, no, technically, it's a cash bar.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, but they serve.
let's-
That's the way it's
No,
written.
all I'm saying is,
The,
it is a
the
ca-
district doesn't support the purchase of the alcohol
then
by their
that's-
sponsorship.
and then again,
Yeah.
the reason it's.
But listen to the reading of the piece, and then let's make a decision.
Yeah.
It says that no alcoholic beverage or other controlled substance may be possessed, consumed, or distributed.
Yeah. So if we
That is
check it,
distribution.
there's no more alcohol.
Even if it's a
at the
cash
event.
bar.
Well, let me put it this way, are there any other events that even remotely the district holds?
As far as I'm concerned, maybe if we take any functions occurring on board property, maybe that takes care of us. It might be the only thing that we run into. I mean, I don't know if there are other things, but I guess the thing that struck me was the thing that the union does at Lander Haven too. But I guess that's technically not. But it's technically not ours.
Right.
But I think we might have situations where we kind of co-sponsor things with the union, and I just in my mind I just can't think about. I can't come up with what that might be, but it could be
Well, the second one eliminates a whole
the
host of
property
issues.
issue.
The
I
first
think.
one, you got one issue, one event, and then the other ones are theoreticals.
Well, what I would say is that if we do the second one, then we ought to be all right for now. It's almost like Eric said a minute ago. Let's deal with that when we have some problems.
So we're adding the second one, or are we keeping the first one?
I think it sounds like we're adding the second one and removing the first one.
Removing the first one?
Yeah, like I said, I've not been to the event, I don't care either way, but that's why I brought it up, because I couldn't imagine that there wasn't something that, we did where. But I run events all the time, and some people will say, you're not gonna get adults to a nighttime event if they're not gonna be able to, if they're expecting to be able to have a glass of wine with dinner, and other people say we should never do it,
Well,
so.
we do all, the Hall of Fame, Hatham does everything at the high school, we do everything off-site, but it is a district event. So what I'll do is I'll speak to the superintendent in Hatham and say, going forward, because it wasn't here in the policy, hey, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to say, hey, Lander Haven cash bar or not? I mean, or whatever administration wants is what we'll do for an operational standpoint. From a
Well, I think
policy
at this
standpoint,
point in time, I think we've kind of said what would work in the short run.
Right.
And I think the issue, maybe we revisit this if there's, and maybe we ought to start figuring out what are district-sponsored events. What, is there anything other than that we might want to be concerned about? And I don't have an answer. But I don't mind the alumni having, I'll be quiet. Joe understands what we're asking, right?
Yep.
Okay.
We'll make, and you have another,
Well,
you have
we're-
another 2 times to think about it.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and
Let's-
actually,
They'll be
as we're
drinking
coming
at
to the
those,
last
so.
one, I wanted to ask you a favor. Can we talk about the very last one in specificity at the second reading? And the reason I'm asking that is, there's a lot of things in here, and it says that it has been revised to align with recent revisions to 5722. This round of Neola policies, there were no revisions in 5722, so I'd like for us to check our reasoning for our
Okay.
checks with that other one before we
Oh,
recommend them to you.
Where is this, Joe?
The very last.
The very last one, policy 97.
Oh, 9700.
Just looking at it now, it's like, we may have not looked at this deep enough. Because Neola doesn't say that there's new laws, that they made some changes here, and all of their changes are dealing with check boxes. So I want to make sure that we did or didn't compare to what they're comparing to. So if that's okay.
Okay.
And so we'll bring this one back in detail, and we'll have the second reading with the other adjustments. And I want to thank you for the marathon.
Thank you.
Really did well.
Thank you for all the clarity.
You give people their assignment.
I didn't talk to Cal yet. Want a motion to adjourn?
Is that it?
That's it. Thank you again.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Gaynor?
Mr. Koval?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Mr. Silverbridge?
Yes.
Mr. Sills? Yes.